Welcome to the Portland Real Estate Podcast, Oregon and Southwest Washington's #1 show for real estate news and information. Without further ado, here are your hosts and a couple of guys who, as busy realtors and successful brokerage owners, know a thing or two about real estate. Steve Nassar of Premier Property Group and Joe Festolo of Soldera Properties.
Welcome, everybody. Really excited today to bring Steve Scanlon, nationally renowned speaker, coach, hell of a good guy, all that good stuff. We're really excited to bring him to the show today for all of our listeners and subscribers, because there's going to be a lot of great takeaways here for you. Steve, I know that you and Steve Nassar go back many years, 10, 15 years. But to tell you what a small world it is, I know that you're the author of 2 published books. And it's really funny that I have read both of your titles. And so far, they're both great. That's a joke.
The titles are great.
And I do want to unpack that and figure out how you got your one title. But since you guys have more history than you and I do, I want to introduce Steve Nassar, where you could kind of fill in some of the background of how you met and take us up to today.
I love it. Well, thank you, Joe. Thank you. I'm very excited about this podcast. So let me take it from the beginning. So I was introduced to Steve Scanlon. Gosh, Steve, I met you in Palm Desert in 2007, maybe. At Todd Duncan's Sales Mastery event, right? At the JW Marriott. I was introduced to you by a person. We were out of our local market. Now, Steve Scanlon lives here in Portland Metro. I believe you have a house in West Lynn, if I'm not mistaken, Steve. And but I was at this, national event with, some of the top mortgage people, many mortgage people from around the country there. And I was introduced to Steve Scanlon, and I was told that he is, upper echelon mortgage coach for, at the time, he worked with Champions. And I was in the mortgage business at the time, even though it was a challenging time in the mortgage business. There was a lot of headwinds coming at the business. And I was introduced to him, and I started coaching with Steve. And he's hands down, and I don't say this lightly because I've done other coaching, and there's some wonderful coaches out there, but he was hands down the best coach I've ever had. He was just at the top of his field in what he does. He was then, and I can't imagine he hasn't gotten 20 times better since then, as he continues on a similar but different path, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today. But through him, what Steve did was he at the time was the one of the top coaches within Building Champions, and he also ran this group of top mortgage lenders from around the country who he coached all of them. And I was so fortunate and blessed to be allowed into that group. It was an invite only group, by the way. You didn't just get to raise your hand and go, I want to be in that group. I was fortunate to be in that group, but we also quarterly would meet at pretty nice destinations all around the country. One quarter we went to Austin, Texas. One time we went to Park City, Utah. One time we went to Chicago. One time we went to Del Mar. And there was other trips there. And we would all come together, and he was the unifier of us all because he coached with us all. And we would have a couple-day retreat in this usually very nice, 4 or 5-star hotel conference area, where we would talk about our businesses. He would have really well-run agendas, guest speakers. To date, Steve, I've never been a part of anything as cool as that. And it wasn't, we've all gone to one-time events where you go, hey, come to this conference somewhere, and it's awesome, it's powerful. And then you leave, and you don't see it again for a while. This was a recurring thing that we all looked forward to. It was at a challenging time in the economy. I mean, it was in the depths of the Great Recession when we were doing this, which, made a little challenges financially for some of us, but it was well worth it in the end. And we almost became a little bit of a support group. In the years since then, and this is where we're going to go with this, is Steve has moved on to other ventures. He started his own company called Rewire. As Joe mentioned, he's the CEO of that. And I'm excited to talk to you about how you've shifted, some of when you and I kind of talked in advance of this, you said a very powerful thing. You said you went from training people on skill set to more to mindset. And we're going to talk a lot about that today. I'm thrilled to have you on our podcast. Thank you. And by the way, Steve is a guy that, and I can't stress this enough. He is a nationally renowned speaker and coach. So when I asked him when I ever so humbly asked him if he'd be on our little podcast, he jokingly said, "How much are you going to pay me?" I said, "I think I can do a round of golf with you at Tualatin Country Club," because he's an avid golfer as well. And he laughed. He goes, "I'll take care of you, Steve." I'm joking. So I mean, he's an awesome, gifted speaker. I recently connected him with a friend of mine who's not in the real estate space. He's in the business to business sales space. They hired him. They were raving about the presentation he did. They're a firm in Beaverton. So, welcome to the show, Steve. Are you 10 foot tall and bulletproof? Do you feel?
Are either of you guys aware of how awkward that is to sit and listen to 7 minutes about you? That's
no, your turn. Talk to me. Talk about me for 7 minutes.
Yeah, you guys are.
I'm kidding.
Before we get going, first of all, thank you, both of you. Very, very, very kind. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to do this work. Obviously, if we're passionate about what we do, none of us mind sharing our passion about what it is that we do. And certainly we're going to dive into that today. When you were mentioning, Steve, those events that we did together, and you ran through a list of those cities, what was really funny is I remember each of those particular events. And in fact, the one in Austin, Texas, if you recall, we hired a band that's from Austin. Austin is notoriously and famously known for really, really great music. And there's a band, I believe they're from Austin, and the name of that band is Del Castillo. And that's a last name. It's the last name of the two guys. I think they're still around, but do you remember that concert?
A little bit. Yeah. This would have been 2008.
For other your listeners, if you're into just, they sing both in English and Spanish, but I would say those two brothers, one in particular, was one of the greatest guitarists I'd ever heard. And they came and we hired them to work a show for the group. So you might want to write that down. Go remember Del Castillo.
Del Castillo.
Yeah.
Yeah. We also went to Vermont one time too. I mean, it was such a treat, Steve. I mean, beyond the great companionship and coaching and camaraderie that came from the best of the best in our same field from around the country, all strategizing and sharing best practice. We just got to see some cool places you probably wouldn't normally go for any other reason, right?
Well, then part of that was, I think it was Dr. Henry Cloud that speaks of, he has this saying, and he says, change your pace, change your place, change your perspective. Yeah. Right? The truth is, us sitting in our offices, it isn't that we can't be overly creative or whatever, but when you do get out and you go to places, that place in Vermont was actually a property called the Equinox in Vermont. Again, I feel like these people should, send me money for saying this, but
you have really good memory. I will give you that.
The Equinox in Vermont. I've yet to get back to that. I came back, and that was a really magical property in the mountains in Vermont. And it was
there was a house that we saw that I think Abraham Lincoln had lived in at one point. Yeah, it was like a museum
or something. I remember walking down those streets at night. Those streets were made in the 1700s, and they still had the original marble on the sidewalks.
Yeah,
and I just remember it was kind of lit up in a way, and I was like, felt like I was in a Thomas Kincaid painting.
Yeah.
Like this place is crazy, but really beautiful place there in Vermont. Maybe there's people in Vermont going, duh. Yeah. It's a really pretty state. So anyway, it's cool to be there.
Let's talk about the years since then. And to be fair to our listeners, in 2012, I got out of the mortgage industry, got into real estate, and life happens. I ran into you a few times. I think in 13 or 14, I ran into you at the Street of Dreams over there in West Lynn. We caught up a little bit. I saw you a few other times here and there, but we kind of I went down a different path, and shortly thereafter you did as well. You started Rewire, and so I'd love to hear about that. What year did you start Rewire? And what was your mission and goal with that company moving forward, and how has it gone since then?
Yeah. Well, look, as you mentioned, I worked with Building Champions. It's a great company in Lake Oswego here in Oregon. My friend Daniel still runs that company, and they're wonderful people. As politically correctly as I can tell that story, I worked at that company for 13 years. I grew a lot. I would say about 8 or 9 years into working at Building Champions, my interest, I started to become a little bit of a student. I was trying to just understand, Steve and Joe, I had a question in my mind, and the question was, what is it that actually and sustainably, that's a really important word, sustainably created human change? Right? If you want to go or grow or develop or reach a goal or whatever, I hope this isn't too much news for people, but if you want to achieve something that you haven't achieved before, you have to change something. And I was really, to be honest, all the coaching I was doing, I think I was a little maybe underwhelmed about how people were changing. And so I started to become interested in what created genuine human change. And as I tell the story now, look, if you ever became interested in that, number one, I think really interested, I want to study it, understand it. Well, first of all, I think you'd find your way into the field of emotional intelligence. You just would. And from that, and that's where I started to take courses and classes, and I started to get certifications in different things. And I tell people, I've got a bit of an addictive personality, which is true. Like you said with golf, I don't just do things, I go crazy, and it's, and I kind of did that with this. The truth is. And so I started to get into and understand a little bit more about neuroscience, which is a very broad field. And within the field of neuroscience, you have all these little subcategories like you would in any academic thing. I mean, neurobiology, neurochemistry. There's a certain field in neuroscience that's called plasticity. It's really about how the human brain changes. And I started studying and understanding a little bit more about neuroplasticity and how the brain changes itself. That's what plasticity is. Well, as time went on, I got so wrapped up in this, and I was taking all these courses that I really wanted to go and create my own curriculum that had a different foundation. Again, it's not going to sit here and go, it's better, just had a very different foundation, because I wanted to take what I was learning in neurochemistry and biology. I went and got a certification through Dr. Daniel Siegel at UCLA in interpersonal neurobiology. Again,
Was that an in-person class, Steve? Or was that online? How did you do that?
It was both.
How long were you in that class?
6 months.
6 months?
Yeah.
Wow. So does this mean instead of productivity and growth and systems like other personal coaches, you drill down more on mindset? What does all this mean? All of these credentials that?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
100%. So yeah, anyway, to answer Steve's, and I'll get back to that, Joe. I started Rewire as an attempt to go, hey, how could I bring to bear and bring to light this work that I was doing inside the realm of coaching? And so, yes, Joe, we consider ourselves mindset coaches today. Our little saying around here is, you really can't help anyone act all that differently until you help them think differently. Which, by the way, might not necessarily be true, because what I've learned is you can absolutely help people act differently, but then the question becomes, for how long? Right? How often do we go, that's it, I'm going to do this thing and do this thing, I'm going to act differently, but we keep coming back and resorting back to different behaviors? I think that's largely because, of what goes on here. And over the course of time, I've worked with professional athletes. I've worked with 3 or 4 professional golfers, but all athletes. It doesn't have to be golf. It could be tennis, the inner game of tennis, right? Athletes, if you or anybody listening, if you go to a professional golfer and go, okay, at your level, what percentage of what you work on is your skills? Like I have to, learn how to do whatever I got to do. And what percentage of you being the athlete you want to be or grow is between your ears? Well, if you just had to assign a percentage to what you work on as an elite athlete, is it mindset or is it skill set? And I'm curious what you guys would say to that.
I would say at the high level, it's going to be a lot of mindset because they've already got the skills. They've already been working on those skills for a lifetime, probably. So I'd probably maybe say 75-25 mindset. Would be my guess.
I was going to say 80%. It goes back to the old sort of relationship goals. If you don't work on yourself first, how can you have a successful relationship? And since real estate lending, CEOs out there, business is a contact sport. It's a relationship business. And if you're not, I imagine that's where you got the term rewire, is to rewire your brain and mindset to start thinking proactively. And so, there's a little bit of natural given talent and muscle memory for golfers. But if your head ain't right, it doesn't matter how great your skills are if you don't show up kind of at a place at peace and focus.
100%.
So what was the right answer, Steve?
I don't know.
I think it was 80% is the right answer.
I think it's 82.3%. By the way, I've said this before. Anytime someone uses a decimal, you can rest assured they have no idea what they're talking about. We just do that, My experience, which is, by the way, a contextured, subjective answer. I can't give you science-backed answers to this. Although I'm sure there is some. It is higher when you say people at that level. So if that's true, the people that are listening to this today, many of them are at that level. They've been doing this a long time. You guys are probably at this level. Steve, I know you're at this level.
Within real estate. Within real estate. Yeah. Not golf. Not golf anymore.
No, but within the real estate community, yes, people are at that level. So why would that be any different? Now the answer is it is both. You do see professional tennis players, probably bowlers, golf. It doesn't matter what it is. Is there time to go and technically work on certain things? Yes, but like you guys said, they get to a certain level. They got that. So to me, that would be a little bit like when you're working in a coaching program, if someone's going, you need to make this many calls and do this and this and this and this and all this technical stuff. It's not that that's wrong. It's just often I find a diminishment of working on how do you think about that? Because that's what emotional intelligence is all about. I mean, we can define emotional intelligence in 100 ways, but the bottom line is you will take more actions in your life or inaction based on how those things make you feel rather than how you reason. If we just took action based on reason, our prefrontal cortex, it was logical, boy, the world would be a very different place. Nobody would not work out. Nobody, there wouldn't be a line at McDonald's because there's no reason. I don't mean to pick on McDonald's. I'm just saying fast food in general. I think it's largely understood that that's probably not the healthiest way to go, right? I'm sorry.
Sure.
But it might not be. And we know that. And yet we live in a world where it doesn't matter what we know. It's all about how it makes us feel. And that's why I think, we believe here at Rewire, we have 17 or 18 coaches around the country. We're all certified through this stuff. We're not sitting there going, make more calls, do more things. We're actually taking a very different approach of asking people, how are you thinking about it? How are you projecting forward? How much anxiety and worry do you have around a particular topic? And that one, by the way, ends up being a pretty big deal, what we work on, because our world is so riddled with anxiety and worry and fear and fret, by the way, which are primarily future projections of a negative outcome. And so when you work with people on that, and if your anxiety is really high, your prefrontal cortex is just inhibited. I mean, the bottom line is it's very difficult to be creative and thoughtful and generative and go out and take a bunch of actions if we're all riddled with worry and fear and stuff. And so That's just a small piece of what we work on. But that's the kind of stuff with mindset we have found with leaders and managers and salespeople and all these people. When we work on mindset, we end up focusing on the thing that's the actual driver of actions and not just behavior modification. If you just go for behavior, just do this differently. Just do this, just do that. In fact, I have a slide in one of my talks where I have a picture of Nancy Reagan and then the Nike swoosh. And my big joke about that is, what do Nancy Reagan and Nike have in common? And if people think about it, maybe you guys think about it. Do you remember Nancy Reagan's remember hearing about Nancy Reagan? What was her big quote?
Just say no.
Just say no. What's Nike's? What was their main slogan?
Just do it.
What I find interesting about that is how many books, coaches are out there going, dude, just do this. Just do that. Just do this. You know, when I'm practicing on my golf swing, oh, just bring it from the inside out. Oh, really? Just do that. And yet I'm going to write a book one day, Joe, and I'm going to call it Just. And it's going to be partly poking fun at this culture that we live in that seems to be okay with just me going, hey, Steve, just be better at sales.
Yeah.
And there's so much of us telling people to just, and for me, it undervalues, that word sort of undervalues the mindset work that might be required. But by the way, just sell more. It's not that it's wrong. It's just that it's maybe unhelpful, right? I mean,
there's no pathway to get there. Like if someone says, hey, I want to be better at basketball, you could say, well, just get a 3-foot vertical, right? A 3-foot vertical jump. So you need a plan to get there.
Well, yeah. And in that case, you know, you would maybe need a little reality, you know, just have a 36-inch, but that's a great one. I'm going to use that one. You know, dude, just have a 36-inch vertical jump.
So on mindset, it's great because we knew that you're going to be on the podcast today. I had a couple days to prepare. I got together with my COO and we developed some pretty good questions. And one of them is on mindset. By the way, my COO's initials are AI, and she's brilliant. And one question is, to make it a little practical and relatable to our listeners, what are the biggest mindset shifts successful realtors, lenders, and CEOs need to make to elevate their business? So let's make this mindset thing practical. Yeah. What's the ideal mindset moving forward that all the most successful people out there share in common?
I'm going to give you an answer, and this answer is coming from Steve Scanlon 16 years ago.
Okay.
Shift from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset.
Yes, I've heard that many times.
Don't operate from a place of fear. Operate from a place of abundance and success. Don't do something because you're scared if you don't do it. Do something because of the opportunity you see by doing it. What do you think of that, Steve?
I think it's wonderful. But to your point about my growth and development, I probably remember my old self saying stuff like that. It's not that it's untrue, but if you said it again, Steve, you might actually hear the just part of that.
Yeah, there is just.
Do you get that?
Yeah.
Oh, just have an abundant mindset.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks. I mean, it's not that that's wrong, but then, Joe, if you're listening to that, clearly, if you're using your mind, you'd be, okay, well, how do we practice an abundant mindset? Because if not, even the thing about scarcity, don't have a scarce mindset, have an abundant mindset. If you just said that to someone and like drop the mic, like, hey, I'm out. I said what, well, how's that helpful? Mm-hmm. Because I still didn't help people think about what is an abundant mindset. What would have to change in me and how might I have to adapt? How can I see myself having a scarce mindset? How can I practice a level of awareness such that I recognize that is me practicing a scarce mindset. And I see that. And that is me practicing an abundant mindset. And how might I have some agency over that? Those are more mindset questions. Again, Steve, it's not great, but if we're going to do this podcast, let's move beyond the just ourselves.
Absolutely.
We're telling, just be abundant.
I've heard that many times before, come from a place of abundance and not scarcity. And, the scarcity side, money not spent is money you still have versus you got to spend money to make money. How I kind of go about coaching and training is more holistic on the person. So if you're talking mindset, it's one of those head of the snake type of things, right? If you're not right in the head, then all of your relationships are going to be damaged, all your business, everything in your life's going to fall apart. So to get that mindset, it's a balance of like 15 variables. And every year, at the start of the year, I write sort of my goals and my vision for the year. And it's financial, it's physical, it's spiritual, it's charitable, it's time with clients, time with friends, time with family, and then important family members. I have a whole page on just them, what I want to accomplish. And it's getting all of that right. And it's funny with all this coaching, I rarely hear anyone talk about getting in shape, right? They just say, hey, you got to prospect and you need to make calls and you got to do this and you got to do that. They don't worry about the rest of the life balance you kind of need to have both feet planted firmly on the ground. And so the abundant scarcity thing, I think, is part of that, but you do got to take time for yourself. You meditate, get spiritual, always be learning, look at your financial goals, look at your relationship goals, all of that stuff. I would consider mindset and balance.
Mm-hmm.
How'd I do?
You might have said adjust in there.
Did I?
We'll find out.
Well, I wrote, when you asked the question, how did you do? It's hard to disagree. I'm not going to be the person that I'm not going to be contentious with you, but hey, be balanced.
Sure.
Nancy Reagan might have said that too.
Well, I do go and write a roadmap on what that looks like. I just can't say, hey, I want to close 200 units a year with no roadmap. All of these kind of have a roadmap of how I get there. And sometimes you start at the goal and you reverse engineer it to all the things you need to do to achieve your goal. But, it's only an hour and a half podcast. So, but I'm not blindly saying just be awesome at everything. I do have a plan to get there.
No, I get it. When you talk about mindset, and Joe, you're not wrong, and I really appreciate your goals, your plans. I appreciate the holistic approach because that's what you are getting at, right?
Yes.
Very few people, if you want to sell more, tell people, maybe focus on physical health or emotional health or spiritual health or whatever it might be. When you ask about mindset, the interesting thing for me about the topic is we could banter about this for the rest of time and we're not going to cover it all. So roughly speaking, just to give context to this, and you're going to get a little neurobiology here. The human brain has about 100 billion neurons with a B. Okay, so if you wrote that out, 100 billion neurons. I say the human brain, they're distributed throughout our entire nervous system, more than we know in our gut biome and stuff. We even have neurons there. But let's just talk about the ones that are encapsulated in our brain, which is what we're talking about mostly when we think about mindset. But if you think about 100 billion, and then I tell people off of each neuron, there are these little things that you all have heard of called synapses. Synapses are these particles that are the means through which the neurons communicate and create neural pathways, which is basically the biology of that's a thought, that's a neural pathway. There are roughly 10,000 synapses per neuron. So there's 100 billion neurons and roughly 10,000 synapses, depending on where it is in the brain, per neuron. So if anyone's out there, you want to do math and kind of think it's funny, but if you multiply 10,000 times 100 billion, you'd get 10 to the 15th power. It's 1 followed by 15 zeros. But that's not even the mind melting part, because that's just the number. It doesn't calculate the sequential possibilities of those things. Do you get it? Some neuroscientists have said the sequential possibilities within the human brain is as close to infinite as we have in the universe. It's almost incalculable. So when we talk about mindset, the problem with talking about mindset and going, what are the three things, completely doesn't honor the idea that Steve's 3 things and Joe, your 3 things, when you're talking about mindset, there aren't the 3 things. The human experience is infinitely more complex than that. So as a coach, I go about learning, hey, Joe, what are the 3 things for you? And Steve, what are the 3 things for you? When it comes to mindset, the brain's infinitely too complex. We have way too many past experiences. We observe the world and have narratives that are far different from other people. And so it's pretty hard to go the 3 things. But look, you asked the question, and I still wrote down 2 things.
Sure.
And they're different than what I said 16 years ago. And maybe I've devolved, Steve. Maybe I haven't, scarcity. And
I doubt that.
so here are my 2 things today. And I didn't know you were going to ask that, but ask the question again in mindset, like,
what are the biggest mindset shifts successful realtors, lenders, and CEOs need to make to elevate their business?
Okay. The greatest mindset shifts. Now, again, this is just my opinion, and I'm trying to be broad. So I don't want to dishonor or devalue what I had just said about lots of people are different. But the 2 things that came to my mind are, number 1, a shift in learning how to practice suffering. You must learn to suffer well. And secondly, learning the practice of being present. If we could learn how to suffer effectively and practice being present, those are the 2 greatest shifts that I've seen in people's mindset to help them be successful with their company's sales or whatever.
Will you talk about the suffering part? That's not a word that I'm used to hearing in this context a whole lot. It's a little bit unique to you, and I'd like to dig into that. Is that about failure? Is that about rejection? Is that about call reluctance? Is that about like unpleasant things, eating your frog daily? Is that kind of what the suffering you're talking about?
Oh, I think it could be some of those things. The suffering that, and again, remember, I just made this up 5 minutes ago. So right now,
I love it. You've never written the word suffer down? I mean, it sounds like it came out of your
Well, no, I suppose what I was thinking in the manner in which that question was asked. If, Joe, you say, okay, it's 2025, I've got these goals. I've got physical goals, spiritual goals. I want to, write this many, transactions this year for real estate. You have goals. I would suggest to you that a goal, there's got to be a gap, right? There's a gap between where you currently are and where you want to be. Do you agree with that? If you didn't have a gap, there wouldn't be a goal.
It's not a goal.
Yep.
Correct.
Yep.
Right?
Correct.
You would just call it reality and go on with your way. So again, if there's a gap, that means you primarily need to change something. You need to do something differently than you've done in the past. Now, I don't know that that's always true. If all of a sudden Donald Trump or whoever in the world says or does something and the recession or whatever it could be, all of a sudden interest rates for home loans go to 3 again. You as a realtor might not need to change anything. You could be successful based upon some circumstances in the world that happen. You don't need, and I want to even suggest there were a few years where that was the case. There's a lot of people that, man, I'm really, really good at this. And no, it's just a super advantageous market. But typically, if we have a goal outside of crazy things happening, you have to change something. And
Correct.
When we change anything, it is a form of suffering because you don't get to do what you did in the past.
It's true. I agree with that.
Okay. You wake up and you're like, that's it. I'm going to do this and I'm not going to do that. And the human brain is wired. Hello. If you're alive and you have clothes on and you're minimally like not on the lowest rung of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you have a brain that's going, do that again. You see, it worked. I'm here. I'm alive. And so actually those changes represent pain points. Now, maybe not the kind of suffering that, we're talking about in terms of like, I'm going to pin you down and choke you, or not that kind of suffering, but anybody that's been through, I don't know, pick something, a successful diet. Well, you resisted doing something. You might have been excited day 1, day 3, it was just freaking pain. It was pain. So if we can learn, hey, I'm going to make X amount of proactive outbound calls. I'm going to learn about how I can develop AI in my business. I'm going to go out to social media and do some things I haven't done before. Well, if I'm not acclimated to dealing with suffering, I won't go do those things long term. I will return to the things that I've always done. And hence why we don't have a lot of people achieve their goals. It's not that you're not going to get anywhere. You're going to shrivel up and die. I think learning what it means to go, you know what, I'm going to be okay to suffer for a little while and know what it's like to go through that change. That's one of the shifts that I see successful people do, by the way, in perpetuity. You're always, if you want to grow, you accept some level of suffering.
So your definition of suffering is analogous to change, whether from the individualistic level or the economical level, or you fall into the old cliche of insanity, right? If nothing changes, nothing changes. Expecting a different outcome without changing anything. So suffering is
when we intentionally change, you will note that something in you needs to change, and that is for most people very disconcerting. And there is a neurobiological pull back to the way that we were. We have sayings around this in English. You've heard someone go, the devil that I know. Like the devil that I know. Like literally, you'd rather invite Satan into your life than change something about you because it's the devil that you know. So when you talk about shifts in mindset, it's at least some willingness to accept some form of, yes, change. And that's the other thing. The reason I share suffering is because there's a lot of speakers and people that come in and go, this is going to be great. We're going to do all these things. It's going to be awesome. We're going to, yes, all this great stuff. And then day 2, when it's actually not that much fun to go through that change, we throw it all out because I was expecting this to be fun and great. Folks, success can be great. And when we hit goals, it's wonderful. Along the way, learn to suffer if you want to really get great at something.
And people do not like change, even positive change. The real estate market went through it recently with the NAR changes, which I think is holistically positive for everybody. But, you see the life coaches and they put their hand in the air and they tell another person to put their hand up against their palm and then they push on them. And so what does the person do? They push back, right? Without even saying it. And anytime there's change, there's always pushback. Even if it's positive, it's just a mindset that if it's out of your comfort level and it's something different than what you know, you inherently don't like it, even if it's going to be better for you in the long run. Is that fair?
Sure. And so back to your question, what is a mindset shift? Maybe people listening today might ask a different kind of question about their goals. And that question might be, where might I need to embrace a certain level of discomfort or pain in order to achieve some of the things that I'd like to achieve? And that's a different kind of question. And that's a mindset question. And then I have people come to me and going, hey, do you got any steps to help me? Or is there a pill? Will AI help me? No. And in fact, it's not just one time. People that are in growth know that if you're going to grow, you're going to change. And if you're going to change, there will be some resistance to that. And that's okay.
While somebody's suffering, at some point, that becomes the new behavior. That becomes the new normal. Is that around 90 days? Is that your...
It's so funny that you asked that, right? I've asked groups of people, how long does it take to change a habit? And people yell out from wherever, 21 days, because that guy wrote a book called 21 Days to Break a Habit, right? And there are people that say 30 days and 45. And I always tell people, if you have an answer to that, you've been marketed to, first of all, right? Because are you going to quit biting your nails, or are you going to quit a heroin addiction? Right? Those are two very different processes to go through change on, right?
Yeah.
But primarily, Steve, to answer your question, those books are actually really good because they point to some really interesting things about the human brain, which is if you do something repeatedly for a period of time, and it's actually not that long. Could it be 21 days, 30 days? They're primarily talking about, how long does it take for neurons to make connections between certain parts of our brain if we repeat patterns? 21, 30 days. And everybody wants to buy a book on the exact number as if, because that's going to sell really well in a book, right? But here's the problem. It doesn't matter what the number is, because we live in a culture of people that don't want to go past day 2 because day 2 sucks. Ever been to a gym on January 2nd? This is great. I mean, it's millions of people, January 3rd, crickets. It doesn't take people very long to realize that actually doing that in a sustainable way for day 2 and 3 and 4, what feels better than the gym? The couch. No, it just feels better. I'm more comfortable there. And, if I'm going to go to the gym in a sustainable way, and I'm not even talking about physical pain, you have that too, but I'm talking about the emotional, mental, mindset pain of actually leaving a comfort zone and doing something else. So if you did that for 21, 30 days, there's a ton of research on, they've helped people get over nicotine addictions in 30 days, like get over them. Now, you always have that neural pathway there. So I just want you to know that outside of surgery or injury, there's some suggestions that those neural pathways never go away. You have those neural pathways. What we can do in 21 days and 30 days is create new stuff. However, it takes that long. And it needs to be sustainable and continual, and you need to practice the behavior and do things over and over and over. And like I said, I feel like if people can, day 3 and day 4 and day 5, there's nothing we can do to not make that feel not good. So if we can embrace that and go, I get it, I'm going to suffer. And for people that do, they can achieve and accomplish. I mean, human beings have achieved and accomplished some amazing things. But forget that. Let's just say in your business, you want to grow this year. I want to do this. And okay, inventories like this and home prices are like that. Whatever. You want to grow. If you want to grow, you're going to go through change. And if you do, you might suffer a little bit.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. One thing I've come to embrace in my life and career is forced change, and sometimes how it becomes so advantageous. And I mean, Joe touched on this a little bit with some industry changes but it happens in other ways. COVID was a big change. When COVID hit, we were all forced to change our business practices. We started, Zoom, look what we're doing right here. And a lot of times when that forced change hits us, we hate it, but because it's forced, we have to do it. And it's not that long later that sometimes we realize that's better. You know what I mean? And then maybe the situation that forced that change goes away. And we go, well, gosh, I'm just going to keep doing it this way because I think this is better than how I used to do it. And there's a lot of examples of that. COVID was one. Industries forced changes. Sometimes in our lives, there's forced changes. It's almost like a way to experiment with change in a manner that you have no decision about to see if it's better or not. And then once those mechanics are in place and those neurons are firing that way, you sometimes realize that it was for the better.
Yeah, well, a lot of those ones that are forced. I did an exercise recently with a group of people where we walked through the process of learning the mindset of a Stoic. If you all are familiar with Stoic philosophy, Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus and some of these, and there's modern Stoics too, but and people, by the way, the Daily Stoic, that's a pretty common thing that people watch. But interestingly, Steve, I did this exercise where it was like, if you could list out all the things that you dedicate energy to in a day, the things that you think about, that you worry about, that you ponder about, that you dream about, it doesn't matter. What percentage of them are in your control? What percentage of them are outside of your control? And what percentage can you influence? What can you control? What can't you control? And what you can influence? And we literally walked through this exercise of making lists of stuff. And so, for anyone listening and you're thinking about, man, the inventory's like this. Well, here's what's funny. I'm not saying the market doesn't have an inventory problem. I'm not denying reality. My question is, you pondering that, what in doing that do you have control over? All you're worrying about inventory does not impact inventory. You have no control over that.
Same with mortgage rates, right?
No control.
Yeah.
You can fret, but when I think about people who dedicate that much energy to it, again, it might be mildly interesting. Hey, let's talk about it. But then we get to what can we control, which is primarily, again, our responses to things. That's what we are in control of, is how we respond to those things. But I just note that a lot of times worry and fear and stuff are over things that we don't have a lot of control over. And there are some things that we can influence. And so actually understanding what you can control, what you can't control, and what you can influence, that could be a really powerful thing. And then just ask, what percentage of my day, my energy is spent in each of those buckets? And so there's a lot of people in sales, in leadership, that are spending 90% of their day in the can't control bucket.
Yeah. Yeah. That's wasted energy.
Yeah.
At best, it's wasted energy. It might be, it's far worse.
Yeah. Well, by the way, then we're not dedicating energy to that which we can.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. I like those three buckets.
So this individualistic approach. So day one, someone says, hey, Scanlon, I need to do better in these aspects of my life. You pretty much need to know their day-to-day life fairly intimately in order to know their deficiencies. And then when you work on those deficiencies, of course, you have to acknowledge what's controllable and what's not. But those that are controllable, you work on those, and there's noticeable improvement. But then 3 months from now, they might have other deficiencies. Even though you corrected some of their biggest ones, there might be other ones in their life that you can work on. So I think that's kind of the definition of job security, because there's always a deficiency in everyone's life. And you got to take it in little tiny bites, eat the elephant a piece at a time. Pretty soon you eat the whole elephant. And when you work on these three key issues and there's noticeable improvement, then you go look at other deficiencies to have those rise up. So is it fair to say that you kind of ask them lots of questions about their life and what does a week look like for you? What does your day look like when you wake up to when you go home? And how do you really vet out the new coaching customer?
It's the problem with doing these things in a way that I didn't, prepare. So it's really organic. I can only answer that organically, right? Because I
love that.
Sure.
So two things come to my mind. One, and I'll do this very, very quickly. I probably can't draw on the wall or anything like that. But Joe, let's say you wake up one day and go, man, I just love people. I want to be a coach. I want to coach people, and people, like you said, there's a lot of coaching out there. There's life coaching and this coaching and executive coaching and leadership coaching, and we're mindset coaches. There's a lot of that out there. That's fine. You want to be a coach. Well, first of all, coaching is an art and science. There is a science of coaching, right? Like now I'm a fellow at the Institute of Coaching, which is actually endowed by the Harvard Medical School. And I get to rub elbows with people who have been studying the science and art of coaching Dr. Richard Boyatzis has been studying coaching since the late 60s. As best I can tell, that was about 20 some odd years before it was even a thing, right? Like really, really wise people. But here's the deal. your question, and I would just get back to what is coaching? Because we distinguish it between maybe 4 other disciplines: teaching, mentoring, counseling, and consulting, and then coaching. Those are 5 very different disciplines. So if I teach, right, you guys come to me and go, I've never heard of, a behavioral model of some kind, and hey, teach me about that. I'm giving you information that you don't have, right? If you're working with a first-time home buyer, coaching's not primarily the thing you're going to bring to the table. Teaching is.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Mentoring is bringing a past experience to the table. So a lot of leaders out there in real estate, like, hey, when I first got into this game, here's how I did it, and here's how I did social media, whatever it is, you're bringing your past experiences to the table. You're mentoring. Counseling is, and there's a bunch of subcategories there, right? Therapy, psychology, all this stuff. Counseling is primarily understanding someone's past to help them get better in the present. Something's not going on in the present very good, and you go see a counselor and they ask you a lot about how you grew up and all this stuff, and they look backwards and help you make sense of your backwardness so that you can be more present in the present better. And for the record, it's a beautiful, beautiful practice. There might be stigmas around that. There's not a soul that you know that couldn't benefit from some counseling so that we can understand who we are a little bit better. But it's not coaching. Consulting, this one, when I think of consulting, there's some really high-paid consultants. There's some great consultants. Consulting is the art and science of giving somebody else advice. When you go through pure coaching, I want you to hear this, and people are, maybe I'm going to get hate mail or something like that, so forgive me for this. In the purity of a coaching model, and this is according to the ICF, which is the International Coaching Federation, which probably is the 800-pound gorilla of all coach certification in the world or whatever. Did you know that they tell you never under any circumstances ever do you give anyone advice in a coaching session? Ever. Never. How about that? How about all the coaches listening? Never do you go, dude, you need to go do this. You should go do that. Just do this. You should go do that. That is not coaching. At best, that's consulting. You're not coaching. Coaching is the art and skill of drawing someone else's insights out.
Helping them come to the right conclusion.
That's correct. So when you say, do I ask them questions? Yes, that's all I do.
Okay.
Because, and by the way, I'm a practitioner. And again, when we draw this Venn diagram, even for our coaches, is there a time to use consulting? Yes. Is there a time for counseling? Probably. Although that one be the most careful with if you're not trained in it, right? Like, don't go be a dime store counselor. You can actually do more harm than good. Mentorship, like, if I coach the CEO of a software company in the Silicon Valley, I can't use mentorship. I can't go, hey, when I was the CEO of I never did that. So I can't use that modality, but I can coach. Because here's the deal. Let's say, Joe, I come to you and I go, dude, I've listened to you. You told me about your life, whatever. You tell me about a spouse. I'll just make that up. And I listen to how you're doing it. I go, here's what I'd do if I were you. You need to have date nights at least twice a month. That's a consultant. That's not a coach. But so watch this. I could be right as rain. Let's say I give you great advice. I mean, we're going to call it good advice, whatever, great advice. 2 things happen if I give you great advice. Number 1, I get a dopamine hit. Look at Steve Scanlon and his great advice. And number 2, I rob you of a needed neural pathway. Because as it turns out, if I could intervene in your life and ask you some really good questions, even if it took time, if you came and said, man, you know what I need to do? Or if you came and said, Steve, it really dawned on me. I love language like that, dawning, right? Dark to light. If you have an insight, an epiphany, a dawning, 2 things happen. 1, that neural pathway that gets created is much stronger, and your ability to take action against it is way higher. And it lasts longer, literally neurobiologically in your mind. It lasts longer. By the way, any leaders out there listening to this, have you ever noticed if you go and tell a group of sales folks, we all need to do this, and you could be right. And a week later, you're telling them that again. And you get frustrated, like I just told you that a week ago. I know, and that's the problem. You didn't invite insight. You just told and told and told. So the truth is when people come to me and go, man, I want to be a coach. I love coaching. I'm kind to people, and I don't usually do this. You know, if I'm on the golf course, I don't tell people this, but I'll tell you guys this. Most of the time when people love coaching, they love consulting and they love teaching because there's way more dopamine in it than coaching. Because coaching, you know, Steve, you can say I was the greatest coach. I'm not supposed to be the greatest coach. That misses the point. The athlete is supposed to be great. You were supposed to think differently. Now, if I could intervene productively in that, but at the end of the day, it's because we together co-created a situation in which your brain created solutions for itself. And if you do that really effectively, I think your leadership skills can go through the roof. Coaching skills. Again, is there time? If you get a first-time home buyer and they don't know anything about anything, coaching's not the modality. For God's sake, sit down, teach them what to do. There is a time for that. But in coaching, there's a time to really practice the art and skill of what really great coaching is all about. And when people get that, then the actions that they take and the longitude, how long it lasts in the brain, way higher. And that's been studied.
Mm-hmm. Well, and there's a sense of dependence too. If you told Joe, go on 2 date nights per week, and even if it is the best advice and it's exactly what he needed, you didn't teach Joe how to realize that on his own. It's kind of that saying, teach a man to fish and you'll feed him for a lifetime. Had you taken the time and said, hey, Joe, let's talk about what are you doing with your wife? And I don't know why we're picking on Joe and his relationship here, but that's okay. What are you doing with your wife? Where's your quality time? I wonder. And you draw it out of him and he arrives at the conclusion that he should have 2 date nights per week. Now you've taught him a skill. Maybe he can utilize elsewhere to draw other appropriate conclusions and not be dependent on Steve Scanlon to tell him the next thing he needs to do.
And that is the neuroscience.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what happens. But you said something, Steve, that was to me super interesting. If I took the time, one of the reasons I think all too many leaders and coaches don't practice this is because we live in this time-starved world. It's just so much more expedient to go, dude, just go do this. And then I can feel like I did something. You could be like, he's right. But I didn't take the time to go. So like when you come and go, people that need to make more proactive outbound sales calls, right? Well, just make 20. Just do this. Just do that. It's not that it's wrong. It's just that we're undervaluing what's going on here. And if we understood that, I have an example of that like years ago at Rewire. I don't know, now it's been 10 years ago. We did these events, much like what we were doing, Steve, with the Masters Coach with you. I did it at Rewire for 2 or 3 years. And as it turns out, I had a small company. And guess who the salesperson was? So I was getting on the phone and calling people like you and going, hey, want to spend thousands of dollars and go to San Diego and spend time with me and whatever. And I noticed that I didn't like doing that. I'm a coach and I'm trying to help people. Asking people for, that's what it felt like to me. And so I called my coach and I told him this, and he said something because he's a master at this. And he goes, okay, here's what I want you to do. Next week, I want you to call 20 people, which sounds, by the way, like just do that, right?
Yeah.
And he goes, but when you come back to me and tell me that you did it, I want you to be clear about something. I don't care if they bought anything from you. What I care about is your ability to pay attention specifically before, during, and after the call, how you felt about it. What was I really going through emotionally, mentally? What did I worry about? All that stuff, because that was more interesting to him, whether or not I sold anything. And I really learned something about me. I was like, when I was able to get back. And so that was a different kind of coaching. He asked me to explore me. and like pay attention. And he's like, well, what was that like? See, that's a question. And when I was able to tell him what it was like, even as I spoke through that before, during it, and after it, like, whoa, I learned so much about me that it was much more productive to learn that. And I ended up doing a lot better at that activity. And that's just a different process than telling someone, make 20 calls, sell it, go hard, or here's a different script, or here's a different tool. All the scripts and tools and all the stuff that we throw at people. Again, I'm not saying those things are wrong or bad, but they sometimes miss the point of what's going on here. That's like you and I working on golf. Just putt like this, just do this, as opposed to going, how do you feel right before you hit the shot? Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, people at the elite level, that is a huge part of their focus, is their own emotional intelligence, how they're handling it. And by the way, specifically in sports, how they handle adversity. How will you bounce back from an errant this or a thing that didn't go your way? And how well do you deal with that form of suffering? Mm-hmm. And at the highest level, none of them know that we all win and lose stuff. How well we deal with that. And if we can learn that in business, I think it's a game changer for people.
Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the biggest. When I think of superpowers that I may or may not have, I think overcoming adversity and just staying positive has been one that's helped me tremendously through my career. You talked a little bit about being present. When you said the two things, talk a little bit about that, Steve, because you've been talking about that for decades, and it's something that I've appreciated more and more in recent years about being present, in my businesses, particularly in this regards. And did you watch the Last Dance with on Netflix, Michael Jordan's documentary during the days? Do you remember them talking in there about how Michael Jordan was always present? It was a big aha I got there from such a successful figure in our lifetimes. He said everyone that was being interviewed, and he acknowledged it as well, that he was always present. When it was the third quarter, he wasn't thinking about the fourth quarter. When it was game 6, he wasn't thinking about game 7. When he was on offense or defense, he wasn't thinking about what he was going to do on the next offensive play. He was just always in that moment, focused and being present on that moment. I thought that's such a good takeaway in our businesses. It could be really easy to have so many things coming at us that we don't take that moment with our client as we're talking to them to be right then and there and only there.
Well, and it's a practice. When I wrote that down, when Joe asked the question, I said practice being in the present, because it's a practice. I don't know that it's a particularly developed skill in our modern culture.
Well, these make it too hard as well. They have not been a friend to that.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times in business, I feel like a lot of the leaders and different, high producing people that I work with think about business, goals, this, that. It's very, very future oriented. And so again, if we go back to sport, Michael Jordan was an excellent example of that, as was a lot of the, you could go read The Inner Game of Tennis, and there are people that play tennis that are listening that are going to go, that's what this is about. There's not we'll pick on golf because you and I like it. There's not a golfer in the world's like on the golf course during the game going, I got to win, I got to win, I got to win. That is because it's so future oriented. And then what happens is we're not dedicating energy to being and taking the next good shot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely true.
And so in sports, just like life, the reason there's all these books and stuff, because we're equating it because you only have one brain. A lot of times people get hung up about what happened. I should have done this. I should have done that. Man, if I had only done this, invested like this, if I had, and that's past. Again, outside of a time machine, there's no control over that anyway. Or we're dedicating, I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to do this, I got to go here, I got to do this. If we spend too much time in the future, I'm just telling you that my experience with that, anytime I hear someone have anxiety, worry, fear, fret, concern, pick a word. Anxiety and worry are primarily future projections of a negative outcome. Mm-hmm. When we're in the moment, right here, I'm with you on this call right here, there's actually no main threat. We're in the moment. Athletes figure that out, but it's not just to be, we're not trying to just all be Buddhists, right? When you really think about it, when you're really present, your brain has the best shot at being the most operative and generative, even in business. So if I didn't worry about what rates we're going to do or what inventory is going to happen or what prices of homes are going to be, if I didn't spend a bunch of time worrying about that, but instead was being present, number one, I'm going to take more action. Number two, I can be far more creative and generative. And when I am those things, I actually have some influence over my life and how it goes. But there are far too many people in our culture who are too worried and too afraid or fearful or whatever, anxiety, which is a primarily future projections of a negative outcome. And I think it's a pandemic in business in particular, because having a vision and having a goal, we've heard about all these things. And so I'm these days like, by all means, have a goal and then learn to put it down so we can be in the present. Hey, pull your head up every once in a while, look at where you are so you can get oriented. But then, because if you focus on the goal, you can't do much about that anyway, but we can only do stuff in the present and how we're operating. So anyway, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. Steve, this has been awesome. I really appreciate this.
Close us up, man. Let's get out of here. What do we got to do?
What time's your tea time? You said you always golf on Wednesdays, didn't you?
I don't always. And no, I'm not planning to. I've got some other work I got to do.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This has been really special for me. I've always learned so much from you. Today was no exception. You were very generous with your time and everything you've shared here. So how can our listeners find you? You've written a couple books. You have a website. Give us everything.
Yeah. It's so funny. Those of us in business, my company and I, my business partner and I, and all the people that work here at Rewire, we go out of our way not to be hard to find, except it's a fairly loud world, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And so, number one, rewireinc.com. You have to throw the INC in there. Rewire Inc. is our website. You can find us at Rewire Inc. I'm sure if you typed in Rewire Coaching, you can find us there. I'm easily found on LinkedIn. I'm sorry to say that on a Facebook Live thing, but I'm easily found on LinkedIn. Both my books are published and they're on Amazon. You can find Still the Lizard, which is about the lizard brain, and Reality and Hope. Both of those are still on Amazon, as far as I know. And you can, reach out. Oh, by the way, we have a podcast. Our podcast is the Insight Interviews. We've been doing it for 2 or 3 years. Jason primarily does that now, but our podcast is filled with some really cool.
I bet.
Yeah,
you're a natural. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah,
and then email me. I don't know, send a carrier pigeon. I would just say, look, we love to. I do speak around the country. If you've got an event coming up and you want something beyond just the rah-rah and you want to help people think differently, by all means, we'd love to talk to you. We're coaches. We're mindset coaches. So anybody that's thinking that this is right for them, reach out to us. I think info@Rewire Inc. gets to all of us. And again, we're not hard to find, but I will say, Steve, and the last thing I'll say about this is there's technical coaching and adaptive coaching, meaning how we adapt mindset stuff. If you're looking for technical coaching, I need someone to hold me accountable and hammer me and stuff, like, we're probably not your organization. There's a lot of organizations that do that well. And call them. If instead you have come to a space in your life where you realize, wow, I am at one of those elite levels, but I want to get better and I want to grow, and it is about mindset. I think finding a mindset coach and someone that is skilled at helping you think at a different level, we've seen it have just phenomenal impact, longitudinal impact in people's lives. So if we can help in any way and do that, we'd love to do it.
I love it. And they'd be well served to do so. So, well, thank you, Steve. We appreciate you so much. This was a great show. I know our listeners will get a ton out of it. Thank you. And we need to hit the link soon. Okay. The weather's starting to get better.
Buddy, thank you so much. Okay. Thanks for having me, and good luck to everyone. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Portland Real Estate Podcast, Oregon and Washington's #1 show for cutting-edge real estate discussions. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to the members of Masters in Real Estate, a private and exclusive Facebook group, and the #1 source for all real estate topics. Thanks for being there, gang. I love you. Finally, I want to thank our faithful listeners. Without an audience, we're just two guys talking to each other. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so the new episodes automatically come to you. Make it great.